Okay, so to start establishing the size of your exhibition space or the space for your design, I'm going to use Revit as a starting point. So I'm going to go just on the main splash screen here to architectural template, which is always a good template to use to begin a new project. And then before you even worry too much about the exact shape and form of your design, you can just draw a few rough elements in. It's not a bad idea to use things like reference planes and grids when you want to establish these measurements more accurately. But for now, I'm just going to use some walls. And I'm not even going to worry too much about the height here. I'm just going to set the top constraint or the top of the wall to level 1. And then just roughly drawing some walls that are fairly large. So again, it's going to be a big space. So that might be the basic form of the space I've got to work with. And then I can always come back and check any of these measurements. If you want to, you can draw in some dimensions. So we'll go to all faces there, and just to help you visualize the size of this, if you know what some of those measurements are, it can help. Okay, so looking at these numbers here, so things like 38 metres, you can see there, 32 metres and 41 metres, so it's almost 50 metres across. I can always just move those walls out to make it a bit larger. Obviously we can change that as much as we like later on, but for now I'm just going to save as project, and then just make sure I've got a folder for this, which I do, so I'll just... sorry, wrong folder. Earth, water, sky, call it 2014. Okay, so even at that point I can then bring that into 3ds Max. I might put in a few small objects just to again give me something that I can relate to. So I'll draw some more walls just using a simpler wall type for my interior walls. I just left it on double brick for the exterior walls, which again I can change to anything else later on. But for now I'll just go and draw some generic 100mm walls and get some of the interior elements set out that I might be looking at. Just a few more walls for some rooms up here. Join them together. So it really can help to give you an overall idea of the scale of what you're drawing when you have things that are relatable, like doors especially. So if I put some doors in there going into these rooms, then we can work out the design much better later, of course, just to get a rough idea. And even a few pieces of furniture wouldn't hurt. So with component, load family, and then I can just get some basic things like some desks or casework can be handy. So maybe just some basic things like some cabinets here, just to get an idea again, once we're in max, of the size of the things I'm making. That'll do. Okay, so there's a few cabinets along there. This is going to be a service room or something like that. Oh, that's fine. And okay, so I'm just going to save that file, and then actually I'll put a floor in as well. So hopefully these are all things you're pretty comfortable now within Revit. If I just quickly use tab there to get all of those walls, hopefully that'll be something you shouldn't have any problem with. And in a 3D view, then you can see if I go to shaded mode, it does have a floor with some really basic walls and the other things. Okay, so then to start looking at working with that in 3ds Max, the first thing you often want to have is a camera. So the camera view there, I'm going to just create a view through that interior, looking at those things I've created. Again, saving the file as I go. And now I've got 3ds Max open already. So I'm just going to check on the Customize menu in Unit Setup and then System Unit Setup that I've got 1 unit equals 1 feet. 1 foot it should be obviously, but it's obviously going to say feet. And then the display units, it's not a bad idea to have those on either, or definitely on metric, but then either on millimetres or centimetres, whatever you prefer to look at. And so maybe I'll just, for the sake of it, change it to centimetres. Then back in Revit, on the main menu, go to Suite Workflows and then 3ds Max Design Interior Rendering. Even if you're going to be focusing on the exterior at first, still choose Interior Rendering and keep using that setting. It'll affect the way the lights work, basically. And to begin with, you won't need to change any of these settings, so you can just leave this option turned on, show this dialog box next time the workflow launches. You want to make sure it does come up next time because you need to change the settings later on. So leave that tick box on, and then you can hit Run, and it'll give you an option then to either choose a new 3ds Max scene, or even better, go to the Active 3ds Max session, and then you can choose the file that's already open. So that way you can put the settings in to the file you have in 3ds Max, and then bring the things you've done in Revit into it, rather than having Max automatically create a file for you. Okay, so there we go. Once I hit continue, it'll take just a minute because there's not a lot in this file. And there we go. So now I can see it all in 3ds Max. So if you remember from what I showed you earlier, C is the shortcut for camera. So if you have a viewport active, remember you can right click on any viewport to make it active. And then C on the keyboard sets the camera view that you have created in Revit. There should only be one camera. Well, as much as you can, but then there should be things that you're creating that would be too difficult to make in Revit. Particularly, you know, the deconstructed forms or things that might be blown apart and other things like that. And so I'm going to give you a few more examples of those, just following on from the sort of modelling I was showing you last week, or before the break. Okay, so now we've got this sun or this compass in the way, which makes it a bit hard to see where I want to model. I want to model right in the middle there. So I'm just going to select that, and then right-click, and then hide selection. It's a lot like Revit. You'll see a lot of the options there are very similar. So that just takes it away. It's still there, it's just hidden. And now if you remember the way that I showed you, you can start modelling, this is positive modelling, with polygons. Often you can begin with something as simple as a box. So I'm just going to, with box over here in the main command panel, click and drag to make something in the top view that I can see in the perspective. Bring that up, and I've got my basic form. So then right click and it'll finish creating it. You'll lose the properties on the create panel, but on the modify panel or the modify tab you'll see those parameters again. Okay, so I can click and drag on the spinners. If you don't remember, that'll let you just interactively stretch any of those values. Okay, so I'm going to make a sculptural type of form that twists up through this space. Okay, so once it stops freezing, it's just, here we go. Okay, so at the moment it's just a box. I'm going to go to the front view, and then if you remember in Revit, the shortcut for orbit, shift and the middle mouse button. In 3ds Max it's basically the same, but it's Alt. So Alt and the middle mouse button will let me orbit, and it'll orbit around this thing that's selected. I can zoom in and get another view from a different angle. And then the most important thing to get into polygonal modelling, I'm going to right click and then go convert to editable poly. Right, so now notice I've lost those properties of length, width and height, and it's been replaced by vertex, edge, don't worry about border, polygon, and again don't worry about element. So those are the three main sub-object modes. Okay, so within that overall element we've got all these different sub-elements or sub-objects, and so if I want to make this a different form, I can select one of the vertices. It's selected, notice you've got the XY axis there, but do you think it'll let me move it with it like that? No. So if you remember in Revit, when you're working in with massing, it's got a different icon to show you when it's going to move. And you have that in 3ds Max. It's up here, it's on select object. Got to go to the right and you've got there select and move, and the other ones rotate and scale. So they're your main transform tools, just like in AutoCAD and Revit. So with select and move, you get the gizmo, which shows you the different axis directions, X, Y and Z. So I'll just drag with the X-axis to change this shape a little bit, and bring this one out, and so you can create any form you like.
So can you go diagonal, Denny?
Oh, sure.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
You don't have to only go on the X, Y or Z axis to go in any...
Exactly, yeah. And look, you can do this in theory with mass modelling in Revit as well. It just gets pretty cumbersome after a while. Whereas in Max you can do whatever you like. So I've created this deformed shape already. Now I'll go to edge and just show you the same kind of thing. If I select one of the edges, you can start moving those around. And have a look at what it does when you choose the different combinations. So you've got the individual arrows for X, Y and Z separately, but then you have the square in between which will do a combination of X and Y or X and Z and Y and Z. So now with the other one, polygon, I'll choose the top surface. Then if you look into this panel, you'll see it's a big long panel, and to move those panels up and down, you'll see a lot of these, you get a hand. So once you're away from any of the different options where you can see I've got a little arrow there, but then as soon as it goes away you'll get a hand. You can use the scroll bar over here to do the same thing, but that's a pretty small scroll bar. It's much easier usually just to get that hand to come up, and then you can click and drag to see the other tools. So here I'm up to extrude. With extrude I can click and drag and bring that face up, and then keep adjusting it. So back to vertex, and I can choose again each of those points separately, start adjusting those, or I can go and choose again an edge, bring that down, or a face and move the whole thing. So you can just keep extruding from any of those spaces. So hopefully you can see from that you could create any form in theory just by building on that, that basic starting form. With the extrude tool still on, it'll keep extruding. So you need to remember to turn that off once you're finished, and then back to the sub-object that you want. Okay, so that might be enough to get you started with those, with that approach to modelling. Remember, you can always take things away from this. So later on we'll look at the different options you have for negative modelling. But just to give you a very basic idea, I'll make another form, so with a with another box. Okay, so I might want to make a void in part of this, so I'll just do a box that goes through the middle of it, bring that up, and just move that so that it's going intersecting with the base. Okay, so to take that away, it's a little bit of a complicated process. You need to select the object that you want to take away from, and then in the command panel you have compound objects, or you'll find pro Boolean. So if you haven't come across that term before, Boolean is the main term there. Look it up, it's an interesting thing in computing, but for now just remember pro Boolean is the one to use to do subtractions. So you'll see down below it should start on subtraction, and then you can go start picking and choose the thing you want to take away, and it will just subtract it. So you can see I've got an opening through the middle there, and again it'll keep you on start picking until you turn that off. And it's a lot more powerful than the way that other programs do it. AutoCAD and Revit both let you do something similar to this now, but maybe not with all the options that Max gives you, because I can then go and adjust those objects separately. So if we go and find the original operand, I can still move the position of that opening or make it bigger. Okay, so lots of different options for combining those shapes together. I'll just turn the edges on here so you can see the openings there. And so I'll give you a lot more options later on for negative modelling. But then just to finish off with some different modelling options, you'll see on that command panel again, with the, again, just the first option there, geometry. Worry about the others later. Okay, so I was on standard primitives to begin with, and that's where you have those basic forms, and you can create all sorts of things using these basic geometric forms. And so, you know, cylinders, toruses, teapots even, are all sometimes useful things that you'll need to make. But then if you go further down, extended primitives is worth looking at, and you'll see just more complex geometry there. So things like, well, Hedge is an interesting one. Okay, so if we bring that up, you'll see you can change all sorts of properties to make these into more complex forms. So they're like different dice and all sorts of things. So just experiment with those different options you have for the primitives. But then going down even further, you have things like the walls, built-in walls, doors and windows. They give you some options in 3ds Max that you don't have in Revit, but you can do walls, doors and windows in Revit. So it's probably best, if you know how to do them in Revit, just to do those things there. But one thing that you might have had issues with in Revit is the Stair Tool. The Stair Tool is good, but it won't let you do everything. And to do more complex stairs, and to maybe model stairs in a more free-form way, 3ds Max gives you a lot of options that that Revit doesn't. So try things like the Stair Tool. I'm just going to show you Spiral Stair, and you'll see then it'll give you these sort of interactive stairs. And when you look at the Properties panel, you'll see you can change all sorts of things that in Revit would be quite a bit of work. So you might have tried to do these filled-in stairs in Revit. Trust me, that's a huge amount of work to do that in Revit, and it's a few clicks in Max. Even these closed concrete type stairs in Revit can be pretty fiddly. Then when you want to add in stringers along with those, or do things like handrails that follow in an unusual way, it can be pretty tricky. Whereas in 3ds Max, you can see here you've got all sorts of options that allow you to create those things a bit more simply. So you'll see here, along with stairs, you have, it's in AEC Extended, you've got railings. So here I can just pick those paths that have been made from my stair automatically. Now it's gone and put in some horrible pre-made railings, but I'll just show you that one. Okay, so these are just using the default settings, which aren't too good for this sort of handrail, but not a problem. You can just bring that down and then go and adjust the properties. So it needs more segments. The height can be lower. The depth, all these properties just need to be taken right down. Okay, so it's pretty self-explanatory. I need definitely more segments in there, and now you can see it's starting to look a bit more like what you might expect. So the top rail there we go. Now I might change them to just solid, and so that's another thing that can be really tricky in Revit, doing just a solid fill in your handrails. So I'll show you here, and I'll just get the segments to even be more detailed. Okay, so I don't know if you've tried to do that, just a solid panel of glass. When it's something that you just want to see in 3D, it's often just easier to model it in 3D rather than trying to put in all the parameters in a Revit handrail. And for a project like this, the 3D views are the most important thing. You only need to have very basic floor plans that would show the stair from above, and in section you can do a simplified version if you need to show that. But trust me, doing just a simple glass panel like this especially on a curving stair, but even on straight stairs it can be pretty fiddly. And so 3ds Max can give you some options for those that definitely give you modelling options that Revit won't give you. And so once you've got the model starting to come together, we'll look at the lighting and the materials options that you have in 3ds Max, which obviously go far beyond what Revit can do. But it's still good to keep using Revit for the things that you can do there. So maybe just to finish off, I'll put a couple more things in here in Revit. So I might have some more walls that I want to add in. And then I'll just put some doors in there. Okay, so as always, I've got to go to the perspective view that I used originally. Now, there's the new wall. So, I know it's there. So first thing also, before I take it into 3ds Max, to save that file, just in case it crashes at this point. And then on the main menu, Suite Workflows again, so you're just repeating the process. 3ds Max Interior Design Rendering, Run, and then again, Active Max Session. Choose the file that's open, Continue, and there we are. So it's brought the change across. And so you can see there is the new wall. And unfortunately, has it gone? Oh yeah, so it's just reset the view here. So if you remember to set the camera view that you've used in Max, C on the keyboard. We'll set it back again. It's that easy. Okay, so hopefully that'll give you enough to let you set out the main design in Revit, and then bring that into 3ds Max to model unusual forms. I'll do another video later showing you how to get models that you'll download. So remember, you've got a stack of free resources, 3D models and other things you can download for these 3D programs. You can't bring these into Revit. Well, not easily anyway. Especially with this level of detail, there's no way you could really get that to work properly in Revit. But you can easily bring those into 3ds Max. That's what's been used to create them. And then, and finally, AutoCAD can be a good option as well. So if you've got complex designs, especially in the plan layout, sometimes it's just too much work to try and set them out in Revit. And so especially things like complex stairs, I know a lot of you might be thinking of curving stairs that don't follow a straight or just an arc type path, and setting those out in Revit is a huge amount of work. So what you can do then instead is do some of the plan layout in AutoCAD and still use those AutoCAD skills. So for things like splines, especially in this sort of design, it might require forms like that. Just doing a simple spline for something like a staircase. I'll offset this now 1,000, which might be the width of my stair. Okay, so that might be the stair shape that I'm trying to create, which is a pretty unusual shaped stair. But it's something you should still be able to make. And so doing that in Revit though is next to impossible, because you can't divide easily along these curves. Whereas in AutoCAD you can. So you can do all of those freeform sketches in AutoCAD and then use those tools that hopefully you have an idea about, like divide, to help you work out the measurements more accurately. So let's say I want, I've worked out I need 15 treads here. Go to my point style and make sure I can see the points. Okay, so then I can draw in lines to give me the sketch for my stair. So I don't know if any of you have tried to do this sort of thing in Revit, but it's not a simple thing. Well, here actually, I wouldn't draw perpendicular. I'd do, sorry, I should have done another division going the other way. So yeah, it was 15. So I'll just do a divide again. There. And now just join the dots. Okay, so again, using the same approach to go from here into Revit, saving the file first. So I'll just call this stair sketch. And then in Revit, rather than trying to take it straight into 3ds Max, you can bring it into Revit first. So if you do insert, and it's good to do link CAD, so you can keep working on it in AutoCAD. I know the units are millimetres. Hopefully you're pretty familiar with this by now. And I'll use current view only to bring it just into this floor plan. And I can't see it there because I've got the floor hiding it, but if I go to wireframe, we can see there I've got the sketch.
And then would you maybe have to scale it up if you have another measurements wide?
Yeah, that's why. I mean, that is a metre wide because I've done it that size in AutoCAD.
Yeah.
So now I could either use the Stair Tool in Revit and try and use stair by sketch. Stair by component you probably found is pretty cumbersome most of the time. It gives you usually too much and definitely more work to do. So stair by sketch I could use to pick the sides now using boundary and riser. I won't do that. Or I could go into 3ds Max from here and do the modelling there if I wanted to. So again, just trying to get you thinking about that linked workflow.
Yeah.
And so the final thing, I've saved the AutoCAD and the Revit file. So this is the very final thing. I'm going to make sure I've saved the 3ds Max file in the same place. So So let me just go over those main concepts. So you've got the different approaches to modelling, and particularly in 3ds Max, thinking about freeform modelling and approaches you can use using positive modelling, in other words, modelling mainly with these polygonal shapes and the other things that you have on the Create panel, but also maybe starting to think about how you can combine things, subtract one from another. Also then using the CAD programs, particularly Revit, but possibly also AutoCAD, to create things as well when you need them, particularly the main objects that you can make in Revit, like your building components. And then also the linked workflow. So having one file linked to another, particularly going from AutoCAD to Revit and then Revit to 3ds Max, and keeping it all linked together. And so that way you can still get the floor plans that you need, particularly from Revit, floor plans and maybe sections as well, but then the 3D views, particularly perspectives, from 3ds Max. Okay, so I'll just finish that up.